Thanks everybody for being here. Welcome. My name is Jessica Gowers. I'm the communications manager with the Elgin, Middlesex, Oxford Workforce Planning and Development Board. Thanks for being here today, and that this is our first session of the Labor Market Information Made Easy series. I think that I've kind of also made everybody aware of why we started this series. It was just part of our deliverable to make sure that all of the labor market information that we have on our website is accessible to everybody, and it's made easy for people who don't necessarily have experience working in employment, because we have a little bit of a different vocabulary sometimes. So we had 70 people register today, which is an amazing turnout. And I just want to start by saying that completely blew my mind. It made me realize that there are a lot of people who are just like me that needed some help with labor market information. And also that when I started working at Workforce, which is a labor market information organization, I didn't know what LMI was. So I also didn't ask because I just thought that I could understand it in the context of whichever sentence it was being presented to me in. So I think that maybe that's why some of you are here today, that you just want a more clear definition. And we're going to go through the uses of it based on like your, I guess, why it might be necessary for you if you're a job seeker, if you're an employment coach, and also where you can find it. So what is labor market information? So when people hear labor market information, they think data and statistics, like we talked about in that Jamboard session. But in reality, the definition is much broader. Labor market information describes any type of information that's used to make informed decisions about the labor market. So that is a really broad decision or description. And it's really to break down this description when I was looking at it, as I was thinking like, okay, but what is the labor market? Like if you're talking about labor market information, like what's the first half of that definition? So the labor market just simply refers, very logical description of the supply and demand for labor, which employees provide the supply and employers provide the demand. When I read that, again, it took me a while to process it because it's so straightforward for me that it's a little bit like it got my brain a little bit jumbled up. So if we go back to the other definition, and we know now that the labor market is the supply and demand, and understanding more about that supply and demand to make an informed decision about your contribution to the labor market, or it can be done as an employer on behalf of your organization to make an informed decision on other people's behalf for the labor market. And so what are some examples of labor market information? I guess these are quite broad examples, but these are all the examples that I could come up with. The first big one is wages and salaries. So somebody brought that up. An employee or a job seeker might use this like number-based labor market information to understand the average wage being offered. So this could be like, of course, especially as a student, this was something that I struggled with personally, is like not knowing when you're just coming out of university, like what you should even be looking for, because that's not something that's talked about all the time, is what salary or what wage you should be looking for. And then you have like the career calculator and all those different other tools. But really, like, it's an awkward question. So if you kind of know your range, it's going to help you out a little bit in helping to make that informed decision of if you should accept, decline, or even apply for an offer. I know not always the salary is even in the job description, but at least if you know, you can kind of ballpark it. The other thing that number-based with wages and salary that an employer might use this for is for competition-based. Like if they don't know if they're underpaying or overpaying an employee, maybe this is something that is a retention or an attraction issue for employers. If they don't know if they're offering high or low, and they might use this information also when people are leaving and they can't figure out, like I said, with a retention issue, they can't figure out why are people leaving. Labor market information with wages and salary is like always a good place to start. There's also, when it comes to labor market information that's numbers based, there's occupational trends and future forecasting. So this can provide useful and productive results as a student or in high school or post-secondary, or a guidance counselor, an employment coach, or even somebody looking to go back to school and pursue a second career. Knowing the future employment forecasts is really important. And I remember doing that and having that recommended to me many times when I was in high school and university myself, is making sure that you know what the direction of things are going, which direction things are going in. So you're not pursuing a long-term education and then there's no positions available, or it's really hard to find one. There's also a qualitative description for this specific future forecasting that we'll go over in a second. We also can do often future employment forecasts and occupational trends are national and provincial. But the great thing about our data is that it is local. So you can go on our website, you can find local and current data. That's something, well, it's local to the London economic region anyway. So the 3 counties that we serve, as well as the 2 bigger cities. And that's something that we have other videos on, and something that will probably be pursued more in detail with these sessions about the different tools that we have. But it works with the future forecasting, the skills forecasting, upgrading forecasting, and all of those things. The other thing that LMI can be used for, and this is more of like descriptive topics, is duties related to a specific job. So this is where like I was really surprised about the examples of labor market information, because this seems like a lot more casual than the data that we were talking about. But when you're talking labor market information, it's just important to remember that all of these descriptive things that I'm about to mention are included. It's not just the number based data that I just talked about, like the wages and the future forecasting. There's also this whole more like conversational information that I'm going to get into. So the first one, like I said, duties being related to a specific job. So this could be like standing for a really long time, or if you know that like in construction, like, okay, you're going to be working in the sun and things like that. That's really important. And it's, like I said, it's more conversational. So I was really surprised to know that like these are things that are just you either just know them instinctually because you see, for example, like a construction worker working in the sun and you think like, wow, it's a really hot day. Or it's just something that maybe like you're, as a parent, you will tell your kid like when they're looking into something, and you can say like, well, you know, you're going to be dealing a lot with children if you go into that job. Or what you hear with doctors a lot is like, so you know, like it's going to be there, you're going to see a lot of squeamish sites. There's also the role of emerging technologies that can be talked about when you're talking about labor market information. So that could be like electric vehicles, technology and construction, agriculture, manufacturing, as well as software programs and coding and things like that. So like I said, what I'm really trying to illustrate here is that a lot of labor market information isn't just data, and it is really, really conversational. Okay, so the other one is how conditions in a workplace change over time. So this could be like your seniority expectations, raise expectations, unionization expectations. Understanding that this is another thing that I had a lot of conversations with people in my life, is like when I start out, it's going to be different than it is after you work there for 10, 15 years doing entry level work. And so you hear that a lot with people who are advising people who are just coming out of school. There's also the cost of living that's important when you're talking about labor market information relative to the employment opportunities. So where are the opportunities? If you're talking about like, okay, I know that I'm in this field and these jobs are only available in Toronto, that is labor market information. And you see people moving to these bigger cities to find those jobs where the cost of living maybe like is higher, as well as even right now with gas prices, like accounting for, I know I have to drive 40 minutes to work every day, but I also have the option to work remotely. So like all of this is labor market information. It really, really isn't just the data. Information related to employment standards and qualifications about education, training, and career options would also be included. So I know that again, that this is something that maybe you're thinking about if you're thinking about going back to school, or if you are in school right now and you're thinking about, or even like what I do sometimes is where you just look at job postings and see what the qualifications are for that posting. Like if you see like a surgeon at Vic Hospital, you're like, what does that person need to be in that position, which is amazing. So there's always that, which you can look at, and it's not data. So it's not scary is really my point. I also want to talk about how LMI presents itself. So where can you find it? That's beyond just our website. So as most people are familiar with, it can be presented in charts and very complex data with StatsCan and all these other websites, but also you receive labor market information, like I was getting at, just through conversation on social media, in the news, and like on the news when they do stories about, like, you see people going on strike and things like that. So it gives you a little bit of insight into that field. And, you know, like even if you unconsciously, maybe you are having thoughts put into your head about that, or you see again, like pictures of people maybe like there's been a fire, you see firemen or things like that, and things you think like, oh wow, those people, like they're putting themselves in such dangerous like situations to like protect the lives of others and stuff like that. But it gives you like an unconscious thought about that labor market information. So again, it's not just the data. The other thing is, this is a big one for me, is like conversations with my parents. So if there's parents out there, when I was thinking about what I was going to do when I was a teenager and things like that, and I know that the parents out there have had this conversation with their kids, you're giving them labor market information that you know from your own experience. So it's not because you went onto a website and you found some data and you looked at it. It was just because you had that conversation. You have your own life experiences as like a person who's lived multiple years. And so with that, you share that information with your children or maybe even newcomers to Canada and things that you know. Just checking the chat really quick. Doing informational interviews can be LMI too. That's very, very true, because I always want to remind myself that doing interviews isn't just for the employer, it's also for the job seeker as well. And just finding out more about that field, and you don't know until you ask, right? Or just messaging somebody on LinkedIn and saying like, what is your job like? Like, what do you do? What do you look for? What are your job roles? And that's the crazy thing, is that the job, that's what I mean about the experience, is that what you see in the job posting, sometimes that's not even what your role really is, right? Like you take on so many things, or that's like a very technological or logical description of what your role is going to be, and you don't know until you do an informational interview or really work in that job yourself. So yes, think back to a time where someone told you that they'd completed their education, but a full-time position was extremely hard to come by. So this was something that affected me when I was even a child. When I was really, really young, I always wanted to be a teacher. And as I was growing up, I started seeing in those years, it was when becoming a teacher was extremely difficult because there wasn't very many spots. And so I was thinking like, and this is like when I would hear the stories about like, oh, I'm a substitute, I've been substituting for a long time because I'm looking for a permanent spot and things like that. And then I was thinking like, well, as much as I want to be a teacher, I don't know if I can do that. So I was future forecasting, not because of data, but just because of the things that I was seeing and hearing on the news and from my parents and from people around me and from other people I knew that were trying to become teachers. You can even more think about a time where you hear about challenges in an industry, like it's exhausting to be standing for that long or working in the hot sun. So people that are doing shift work and stuff like that, like you hear when they're doing the 2 weeks and then the 2 weeks morning to night, and the next 2 weeks they're night to morning and they're doing that shift work. Like you hear them say like, I can do overnights or I could do during the day, but it's really hard to do back like switching like that because my mental schedule or my circadian schedule or whatever just keeps getting switched around. And then that's something that naturally becomes unappealing to you because you're like, well, they're telling me it's really hard. Or, I mean, I guess you could even talk about it like when you're really young and you're hearing like becoming a lawyer is really, really hard. Becoming a doctor is really, really hard. It's really competitive. And then, like I said about being a teacher, it's something that you don't even investigate. These sentiments all count as valuable labor market information, and this is information that helps us make better decisions about what we should do as employees, job seekers, employers when it comes to making a decision about our jobs. So really the takeaway from this session that I really wanted to get across to everybody is that it's not scary, it's not daunting. Labor market information is not just data. It's also something that you should have confidence in, that you know about. As a person, you might think I know nothing about labor market information, but you do from your own lived experience. And beyond just the data, like you have valuable information, anecdotal information to share with people in your life. In the chat, somebody said, we like 2+2 to get more reliable info and a full picture, 2 formal sources and 2 informal. That's very true. That's very true, right? Because then you can compare it, because of course you shouldn't always listen to what people are saying. But if you can hear like, well, this is what I'm hearing and this is what I'm seeing, and you put them together, then you do have a reliable source. So that was my that was really my premise, is that it's really not as scary as we think it is. And so now I want to go back and open the floor for your thoughts and your questions, or just anything else that I got you thinking about in this session. And thank you.